and welcome to the fourth of the EARMA digital sessions. I am Niall, I'm the Communications Officer with EARMA, and I will be the web host for this very interesting workshop that you're about to take part in. So I just want to briefly explain at the beginning the format for you to participate. So if you are familiar with Zoom, or if you're just using it for the first time, you will see underneath that there's a black bar and with a few labels on this black bar. One of those labels there is Q&A, questions and answers. So what we'd like you to do is, because as it's a workshop, we want people to get involved as much as they possibly can. If you can put in your questions there, and we will answer as many as we can throughout the session, and there'll be lots of opportunities for you to be able to do that. Now, there's another added element to this one, which isn't in the other EARMA digital sessions. If you would like to, because we understand that there's a certain dialogue that needs to be had with this session, because it's a workshop and we want to make everything run as smoothly as possible. If you can indicate when you're asking your questions that you'd be willing to go onto camera to have a conversation directly with Suzanne around your piece, please write that in your question as well. And just be aware as well that we are recording these sessions and we're putting on the website. So indicating that you want to go on camera is also an indication that you're happy to go in the video afterwards. So, so please, when you're putting in your questions, let us know that. So I hope you enjoyed the session today, and I'm going to hand you over to the moderator and your host, and that's Maria Manula. Maria is the Impact Coordinator with Invest Flagship, and she's also the incoming chair of the annual conference program committee for EARMA, standing committee. And the ACPC, many of you know, are largely responsible for this series, the EARMA digital sessions. So I'll be online and so answering your questions and putting them forward for the guys. So I hope you enjoy today, and take it away, Maria.
Hi, yes, so I'm Maria Maula from the University of Turku, Finland, and I'm going to be chairing this session, which is a very big pleasure because last year, I think hopefully also some of others of you attended Suzanne's workshop, or the right stuff in Bologna. And it was indeed one of the most liked sessions of that conference. Very many people highly praised it, and I also have to agree, I think it was one of the most interesting ones. So I'm really looking forward to what we're going to hear today. So Suzanne Darcy is from the University College Dublin Law School, and she has been working there for a while. She has also previously worked in the US and has some experience in editing a newspaper. But what I want mostly to stress is that I can clearly see from her work that she really loves writing and presenting proposals in a way that are more clear and easy access to the reader, but also more eloquent, even beautiful language is possible, or pictures, as we will probably see today. So it's all about loving the language of proposals today and making them sell the idea and make, of course, our researchers gain the funding that they need. So here's to you, Suzanne, and I will be also then chairing the session, so let's go.
Super. Thanks for that, Maria, and thanks, Niall. I just want to thank EARMA for the opportunity to workshop this, and hopefully it's a little less, it's not as interactive as being in the room, but we'll give it a go. And Maria and Niall and Sahar helped me sort of get to this point. And so just like that, you know, from last year, you know, I shared, you know, my love of language and how I see successful proposals are written. And it's about more than just the science writing. It's about bringing, you know, eloquence and flair and positivity and I think a whole host of other things. It's not so much, it's as important, you know, how we write as to what we write. And so I've got some nice examples. I got permission from the researchers, and this series of examples from a Marie Curie individual fellowship, and I worked really closely with this researcher. And just the before here, you'll just see this is kind of what I would get in the first instance, and it's great. You know, it's really good. You scroll down, I know there's a lot of text here. and she, you know, maps out her capacity and, you know, what she, you know, is going to bring to the table. And so what I do when I read this, then I will look for ways to sort of enhance the language, to really sell it. And it's a different kind of writing to scientific writing. I get to be a bit more ruthless and a bit more, my only agenda is their agenda. So I want them to sell themselves and their ideas, you know, the best way I think they can. And so sort of with my years of experience and my absolute love of the English language, I bring what I think to bear, that, and they can be small things and they can be big things. So, you know, we go from this and we go to the red pen, as I call it here. I've got my red pen. And actually this is often the second edit. I'll often just do a paper edit first, and then I'll say, well, that's not fair. I better do it in review mode so that they can see what I actually mean. And so going down, and even I've done it again, I've red penned my own edit. And just in terms of here, when you see the language that I've altered, it's to sort of use stronger descriptors. The researcher, she describes her research as being useful. You know, slippers are useful, but, you know, research should be influential. You know, you to really think about the words we use that will really sell the idea. So, you know, I change that from sort of beneficial and useful to influential, and sort of added, you know, more emphasis in the language. And again, when I was editing this, you know, when you go to, let's say, accept all these changes, the final version, it will obviously read sort of more fluidly, but I add sort of more emphatic language. I write it in the present tense, you know, I statements, action words, just to really bring the idea and the research and what she's bringing to the table alive and current. And sometimes it's good to, you know, feel things and believe things, but sometimes you have to be saying, well, I am and I will, and really, you know, say that you are, you know, you're selling yourself and your different ideas. And similarly further down, I kind of went a bit crazy. And again, to me, this was a significant aspect where she gained a leadership role. But she sort of qualifies that the language she used is a bit, you know, I just happened to, and I managed to, and there's no managing, you know, she was given this sort of squarely and fairly, and to own, you know, the successes and to own the opportunities, that you shouldn't qualify, you know, whatever it is that you do. And so the language should be just, again, sort of more emphatic. And then, you know, again, this is me just editing it, cutting down word count, trying to fit it into page numbers, all these things. And so that's, you know, this is what I bring to bear. And then you'll see the sort of the final accepted version then is nice, clean. You know, if you read this, even I find if you read it out loud, you'll hear how better it sounds than the first iteration. And even you can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are all bold now, and they weren't bold in the first instance. So just even minor little tweaks like that. So that's, you know, that's sort of, you know, essentially my editing process in a nutshell. I don't know, Maria, if you want to ask me any questions on that, or if anybody has any but that's my starting point.
Yeah, I'm going to take some questions. I'm going to first take the opportunity to ask myself, what do you think about, I can see that you're using a lot of bold. How do you see that? Would you think it's something that all the proposals need, and in all the places, in all the parts of the proposal, are they more important? How do you work with the bolding?
Yeah, this has come through more and more, and this isn't me. This is the researcher, and it's a fine line. I try to honor their version as best I can, and if she feels, she was a woman in this case, if she feels that this should be bold, I will, you know, I'll defer to that, unless it gets unless it's too much. But I've seen in subsequent, even ERC, more recent ERC, there's a lot more of this, and I think part of it is to catch the reviewer's eye, because a lot of these are getting very text heavy, but they've always been very, but to draw their attention to that. Like that, it's a judgment call. In the second example, I'm a bit more ruthless on jargon and making up your words and sort of repetition, but this seems to be kind of current right now, actually, and this is even a few years old. So maybe she set the trend.
Okay, there are some questions here. The people have not indicated that they want to go live, so I'm assuming they don't. So I'm going to ask first to Eleanor Rossulo's question, or ask the question. If both researchers, if their mother tongue is not English, would you suggest that they would be proofread by a native speaker?
That's the toughest call. I think if you can get somebody, you know, to review your work where it is their first language, you know, call on a friend. I do it fairly regularly. You know, I'm happy to weigh in, and it becomes sort of an iterative process as well. But I think, you know, it's the research idea first, and so the idea should be able to stand alone. You know, subtlety of language notwithstanding. But for me, it's what is that difference? What gets certain projects over the line and not others? And clearly, you know, France, you know, Germany, we're all getting some share, a bigger share of the pots. So that isn't necessarily the difference. But I think when it comes to proofing or editing, a fresh pair of eyes, a non-expert, somebody removed but who still has a really good command of the English language and understands, you know, what the researcher is trying, this story. I guess that's what I always come back to. You're trying to tell a story here. You're trying to keep the reviewer engaged. They're going through hundreds of these and you don't want to lose them in the first 5 minutes. So it's that sort of balance between the idea and engagement, and drawing them in.
Yeah. So Simon here has agreed to be allowed to talk. So I'm going to try to. Okay, Simon, go ahead. Please ask your question, Simon Carriage.
No, can you hear me?
We
Yes.
can.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yes, I was doubly muted. No, sorry about that. Yeah, so there's two related questions. You talked about using bold, and I have to say I really like that. But I also got a question about mixing it, and now I can see some on the screen, with italics and with underline. Because I mean, I might be answering my own question here, but I think you can potentially overuse that and confuse things. So I would like your input on that. The other question I have is about the choice of typeface. You've got what probably looks like Times New Roman there, and I think that Times New Roman was kind of the default when I first started using word processors, but now we have sort of much cleaner fonts, so you know, sans serif fonts, sort of, which are straighter. And I thought I read somewhere that there was an EDI issue to do with people not being able, or you know, some readers not being able to read serif fonts as clearly as sans serif fonts. So there's quite a few questions in there. So please choose whichever ones you fancy.
You must be my spirit animal, because I'm absolutely, I have such strong feelings about all these things. And what's funny is there's often a battle with my researcher. It's Arial or nothing in my eyes, Arial font, because it's the cleanest, and you know, I'm getting on in age, and for, you know, eyesight, I think Arial is the cleanest font. I know people like Calibri or Cambria, but for me, and I always undo the underline in all my proposals, unless it's a URL. It's now synonymous with, you know, the internet, but they'll go back. You know, I can only do it once or twice before they have to own their final call. So I know I went back and forth with that underline there in part B1 section. Yeah, I wouldn't have it underlined, and I'm not a big fan of italics either. I mean, I think one emphasis like bold is enough. But I know sometimes it's just to distinguish between, you know, if you've got a heading, a subheading, and that sort of thing. But it's funny. I've loved Arial all my life, and for me it's and you can get away. I think how it sits on a page, even like 10.5 point versus 11 point. It's easier to read 10-point Arial, I think, than 12-point Times New Roman. And anyway, so for me, it's about trying to keep it clean, and even these proposals are very like that, very dense, trying to give the white space so that, you know, the reviewer isn't getting just sort of lost in text. But so yeah, I mean, the underline for me is it's absolutely it's a URL or it's nothing. And so I've been lecturing my very young PhD students that will come on sort of my own pet peeves, but sometimes the researcher will just do what they want.
Thanks very much.
No worries.
I feel much happier about the advice I give now.
You should.
I also have to say that I think Calibri takes less space than Arial. So if you're really running out of space.
Yeah. No, it's and it's funny, even people now try to sneak the tables. You know, they give you 9 point in there, and people are going crazy in their tables.
I think that's even allowed in some cases.
Yeah,
it's even stated in the templates or in the rules. So it's good to check always those.
Absolutely, because they change year in year out. I saw one proposal that was so table heavy. It was just the ugliest thing I'd ever seen. I mean, they should serve a purpose, not just to squeeze in more information, because that's what you're trying to do. They should really be, they should have purpose. And, you know, anyway.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
Second example, it's again sort of more of the same, or actually no, I on my own, our agenda here, Maria, sorry, I was going to talk about the power of a good graphic. If you're happy, I can switch over to that. Okay, and this goes back to kind of my years at this, and I do have an absolute passion for it. I love working with the researchers. I love communicating the idea. I think a lot of it is my own sort of backstory. It was a long time trying to work out what it was going to be when I grew up, and it got to be this, and I love it. So this article I found a couple of years ago, and it's about Johan Rockström as, you know, communication is the key to research success. And I liked this because at the end he comes up, and I believe it to be true, for every paper you write, you should create one iconic visual, or for every research idea or every proposal. And they're giving us a lot more latitude to do that now in proposals. You can bring to draw a Gantt chart, you can bring images into a proposal, and that really, I think, can help tell the story. It breaks up the text-heavy pages, and like that, we're visual creatures by nature. We just, you know, a picture tells 1,000 words, or whatever that expression is. So this is one I sort of brought to the table to share, and this is some of, you know, a fairly absolutely successful ERC grant. And again, you can see they're fairly simple, but this one here just sort of maps out the main research question, and it's about institutional authority.
Sorry, Suzanne, I have to stop you here. Did you open another example?
Sorry.
Oh.
No, I went to the graphic here, the research idea. Is that visible to you, Maria?
No, I don't see any graph. I'm still example 2 on the impact of.
Okay, sorry, hang on. Maybe I should minimize that. Hang on. I'm going to stop share and then go out to the other screen. Let me do that. Sorry. Still a Zoom newbie. Here we go. I'll share this one. Excellent. There. That's
right. Thank you.
Okay. No. And actually sorry, I'll go back. This was the article I was talking about that I discovered a few from the magazine, the ERC magazine, and just it stuck with me because I love a bit of color, and it speaks about you know, a good graphic, and how, you know, this is the line, for every paper you write, you should create one iconic visual. Now, most of us don't have access to desktop publishers and cool kids with graphic skills, but you can be amazed what you can create yourself. But this one was, money got dropped on this one, and this was from our ERC consolidator, and basically very simple, but it's clean. It maps out the research idea, and then they similarly in the same, they map out the work packages and as they are going to progress, and it just shows sort of the structure, the workflow, and the outputs of the work packages, and it's a nice feature. And I know this image was created actually for the interview part, the stage 2, and so again, got permission to use. Again, it's to really help the reviewer to sell the story. It's like a storyboard of where this research is going to go, and like that, I've worked on a proposal where, like that, it was the researcher had their own vision of their framework, and I like this. This researcher was over in Canada. We could only sort of do sort of confer through Skype, and so I was saying, you know, it's a fairly, you know, it's a great idea. What do you mean? I said, map it out. So she sent me this, and then I would have fairly, that's fairly okay. I'm going to close one of these screens just so I can bring up the next one. So this is not iconic, let's be honest, but it's a bit of color. It represents her research framework idea, and you know, the flow of where she wants this to go. So that broke up again, you know, a proposal that was sort of very, you know, text heavy. And so for me there, you know, if you have the means and the support to add to a researcher's proposal, it's a nice thing to be able to do. And I always encourage people to say, oh, I can't do a Gantt chart, or do I have to? I said, please do, because you know, it's what's going to set you apart, or it potentially can, you know, they'll say, oh, do you remember that cool graphic? Go back to that one again. It might just trigger something in, you know, a team of reviewers that will, you know, set you apart and get you the funding. And so they were my sort of 2 graphic examples. I'm going to go back, if you like, Maria, or if you any questions there. I'm going to go back to the other sort of text examples or proposals. I'll bring this up now and share it again. So this was example 2, and I don't know if, are you happy for me to go on, Maria? I know it's, I know people may have questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Again, this was a second part of the same proposal, and we were working very closely at this stage, and I'm going to just bring up my own notes. And, you know, this researcher really, you know, the idea is superb. And so it was just, again, about subtlety of language. The language often was a bit sort of not as positive. There were examples of doubt. I'm going to sort of, I'll walk you through this to some extent. If you go down here, this is sort of the before, and there's mention of she'd had a new baby, her workloads. There was other language here, and she would go down. So this is her first, you know, honest cut of you know, where she is and the impact this is going to have in her career. Again, when I read this in the first instance, I felt there was, you know, some half apologetic language. Anyway, so when I go to my ruthless edit, it's very red. Again, this actually, this is example 2. Sorry, example 2. Sorry, it should be this one. This is the impact. I made the call. We went back and forth over this, and I said she shouldn't mention how difficult it is, you know, having a new baby. It's none anybody's business. I said it's enough that most researchers have to teach and have crazy admin and teaching loads. I said it could have had an impact, you know, positively or negatively, but I said let's just remove it. I said, let the research speak for itself, and let you speak for yourself. And so I tweaked this, the engaging in research full time. She had written a substantial difference, and substantial to me just sort of just speaks to volume, but her work it's more than it's more than just substantial. It's going to be significant. And so I was trying to, bolster the potential and the impact that this is going to have. And again, it will not only enhance, but it'll advance her potential and future career prospects. So I was all the while reading what she was writing, and just like that, trying to make it, again, if I can take, no ifs, ands, or buts, no qualifying language, you will take, if you don't believe it, you're not going to get anybody else to believe it. So just that, again, subtlety of language, the triangle, I call it a nexus, which will then enable, again, emphatic, present tense, first person, and just really push the hard sell. And that's what I consider my job. And I, and at the end of the day, it's up to each researcher to take on or leave whatever it is I say. These are just my suggestions. I love the space as a research manager because, and as I said, I've no agenda other than their agenda, and to secure funding, which is good for the school. And so for me, it's this storytelling aspect. And I think as research managers, we're held in a place of trust because, I'm not trying to steal work, I'm not poaching ideas. It's this nice space where we can bring the expertise we've garnered over the years to bear. And so when when you see the final version, when they send it on to you, you wonder how much or how little, and mostly they take most of it, is my experience. They take most of it. Again, she stuck back in the underline. I had to let that one go. But they take most of the suggestions on board, and even the last call will always be their PI or their supervisor or their mentor. So by the time the mentor gets this, hopefully their job is a little bit easier. So they were my primary sort of writing examples on that. I've done the graphics. And then there was, I don't know if anybody has any other questions, but the last piece I was going to discuss was just conflicts within the editing process. And, I've discussed a bit, like Simon, the underline and style and font. But recently I've had conflict with the supervisor or with the PI on a piece. And I'll show you sort of examples of that. And part of that is, Maria, you alluded to it, you have to go to these sessions, you have to read the guidelines because they change. And often the mentors or the supervisors, they're not at these workshops, they're not as current on what's expected when you fill out a proposal. And again, they forget it is a different kind of writing. And so I had a great battle of wills with one of our senior professors, and it was unfair. It was a proposal for a young researcher, very early career researcher, and she was like conflicted, like, oh, who do I believe, or who do I follow? And I said, well, at the end of the day, it's your work and your research. But this is what I know that they're expecting or they're looking for. I'll show you just. I have to go to the other screen on this one. I'll show you that example. And where is it? This one here. Yeah, I was just on an abstract, and for a lay audience, and this was the feedback from the supervisor, and the big no exclamation part there, and he does a blue pen, but he's completely at odds with the advice I've already given her. And like I say to personal, I'd say, I believe, I wish, I believe in the I statements, but and he was at odds with it. But I said, you know, the point is, it's not an abstract for a research article. This is about selling your idea to a funder. So anyway, and I spoke with the supervisor on this, and I said, you know, you should probably go take in a workshop, you know, to get yourself a bit more current on what is expected. And interestingly, you know, the final version, which I often don't see for months later, she went with me. So she took my advice for the most part. You know, I aim to develop, you know, my research will focus. And so, you know, it's only 300 words to give across exactly what she wants to do. And so, you know, these are all works in progress, but sometimes you kind of have to, you know, throw your weight around to some extent, but then it is their call. And they can say yay or nay depending on, you know, however else they're being advised. And so that was sort of the conflict within the editing process. The other examples, one of the highlights was she kept using hence at the start of many sentences, and I don't think I never say hence unless I'm being ironic, and you hardly ever see it written anymore. And so I just said, could we just do a find and replace and see how many are in it? And she's like, oh, go on. And there was like 11 henses. That's, you know, 10 too many, maybe even 11 too many. So, you know, I'm at the point where I do, you know, I'm cruel to be kind. And, you know, there are nicer link words, and sometimes hence is often just redundant. You know, it's therefore, moreover even, but 11 henses, yeah, too many henses.
I have a few questions here now coming up.
Okay, great.
I'm not sure if Rachel wants to go live, but I have a question from Rachel, where she's asking that in the original, the language is okay, but what do you do when a non-native English is less good and would require much more basic fixes? Can these subtle tweaks and storytelling be added without doing a full review?
It can be very challenging, and I've had a couple of instances where it was really not an edit; it was almost a rewrite, and that's, you know, a sort of, you know, there's a line there that do you cross or not, sort of, it's an awful expression, but above my pay grade, but also a massive time eat. And so I would often go back to their supervisor or, you know, the person and say, you know, how much work, you know, do you want me to give to this? Or I might go to my line manager and say, listen, there's a great idea here, but I would need to, you know, devote the next month to this. And if I get support from my line manager or higher up, I can do that. But if they haven't basically sort of sold the idea or themselves, it's very hard to tackle that. But I, you know, again, sometimes they're not ready. Sometimes they may need to go to, UC have a great writing center. But even this process is a great learning process. There was at one point I could give it, I was able to give it a few days. So I said, listen, I will do what I do to the first 3 or 4 pages, and all the, you know, the sort of the language I'm using, you should be able to apply that sort of moving forward. If you see sentence structure, if you see syntax, if you understand the tenses, you know, and if, you know, clearly if they're all PhDs, they should be smart enough to hopefully take that on board and really learn. And I've seen people get much better at this over time, but it's iterative and it takes practice, and, you know, it takes a lot of practice.
You're saying you have a writing center that's helping people?
Yes, yeah.
Speakers. Okay.
Yeah.
What is their role?
They're dedicated, I think, primarily to folks whose English is their second language. It's run by quite a number of people whose English is their second language. Well, it's way back when we did a huge international cohort, but COVID-19 has them dissipated for now, but like that, they help with thesis writing. Now they don't really, I don't know that they necessarily do the proposal work, because we have UCD research and we've got research managers and we have other supports to do that, and we have guides, but they help on the real academic writing side of things. So so they should be better, they should be able to really improve just, you know, written English to get it to, you know, a kind of higher, a bit more sophisticated level of delivery. And, you know, and again, that's time spent,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay, so there are some questions coming in, so let's move to the next one.
Okay.
I'm going to remind people that it would be really nice if I wouldn't need to be asking all the questions myself, so I can give you yourself the right to speak, but you would need to indicate this in your question as well. But since it hasn't been indicated in the next one, I'm going to read it.
Okay.
From Anke. She's glad that you're to hear about the emphasis and wording. My experience is that I have to do this over and over again. So I want to train them, the individuals as well as the group. And she's asking whether you have a general style book document.
It's a great question. I don't personally. What they did ask me to do this year that was a bit different, and I think to preempt that, they let me, they gave me a class with all the new PhD students that were coming in. We had maybe half a dozen of them. Now I would have said it was already too late, not too late, but you know, and I know they do writing in first year and second year undergrad. But it's a good idea. You know, it's something I should probably have, is a guide. It never dawned on me to even do, you know, a checklist. I know there's conflict within the law discipline, because that's where, and I did some in arts and humanities on different writing styles and references and different things. But for me, I think, you know, a well-written story, you know, will tell itself, and bring in a couple of the good graphics. But I definitely, I'm going to make a note now. I'm going to do a style guide, and
A good idea then.
yeah, no, it is. It really is. And because even like Simon's point about, you know, preferences, and even it'd be lovely to share it, because you guys will come at it from different angles, and, you know, based on your last successes and or failures, you'll see what seems to be working and what doesn't. And of course, that moves daily, and I often find there's no rhyme or reason to why some things get funded and others don't, but definitely certain things trend and practices, and they do evolve over time. So style guide is something I'll put my mind to.
Yeah. I'm going to allow Margorgata to ask, please.
Margosata, yes.
Margosata, yes, sorry.
Yeah, I found this writing center that you have sounds quite interesting. So could you tell us a little bit more, like who is part of this writing center? What's its role? And yeah.
I tell you, I'm not as fully versed on it. I know they run seminars. I know they're a unit within the university. I know they're subsumed under, I think, the library. So they have writing classes where I think, depending, they'll have PhD students present to undergrads, and maybe postdocs present to PhD students. I'm not quite sure what level of the academic or faculty are involved. I definitely would. I could go and, you know, do some research. But you should, if you Google, you should find them on the website fairly easily enough. I know they were struggling for funding, as are often a lot of these supports, and I believe it was only a few years ago there was only a temporary contract person sort of running the show, and it might even have been only part-time. It might have been only 3 days a week it was open, but it's definitely there, and it's primarily a student resource, I think. But I'm not wholly up on it, and yeah.
Sounds really interesting. Yeah, I think that it's it's good for the researchers to have a point where they have, like you, like trusted advisors that then they just can exercise and then have yeah, this awareness about also this writing style and yeah, the storytelling and things like this. That sounds really nice.
Yeah, well, it's funny, we've been trying to encourage, just even at the school level, the academics could be so sensitive about their work and criticism and different things. We're trying to encourage a light sort of peer review aspect. We run a working paper series, and just like to ask your colleagues, to ask your peers to take a read over your papers and to give some feedback. It's funny, the COVID-19 thing has sort of changed sort of how we communicate and interact. And we threw our last research seminar, it's kind of a seminar on Zoom, and I had more people at it than I had in months at the sit down, where we even gave a free lunch. But it was brilliant to see, and I wonder, was part of it that they were more comfortable because they were a bit removed. And of course, they're probably just desperate to do something because we're all in lockdown. We need to see a live body. But it was far more collaborative, and even because we kind of did a round robin, we had 5 people present on 3 different research papers that they were working on, and it was a real success. And like people were like, oh, this is the way to go. I said, I know, and it will save a fortune on lunches. I know, but it was lovely to see. But that they do need to, they forget to talk to each other, Margot, they forget to communicate even at the very highest levels. And so I would definitely be encouraging more of that. And I get to, because like that, it's that nice space where they don't feel they're being told what to do, or it's not the dean, or it's not the head of school. It's just me trying to encourage output and funding and all that sort of good stuff.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much for sharing this kind of best practice that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Then I have questions from Maria. Maybe they are different Marias, but I'm going to put them together. In order to improve your skills as a research management administrator, helping research to improve, how do you suggest we would improve our skills? Do you have any guidelines? You gave that great example of a link. Any other blogs or something? I'm thinking now, this is not Maria's question, I'm adding stuff, but what are the guidelines you could recommend? And she's also asking, how do you manage to read all the grant applications? Do you work in a team?
Yeah, I do. The law school are lucky. I said they're lucky to have me. I know they're lucky in that for now the post is funded, and so I'm dedicated to them. There is a much bigger UCD research provide massive proposal support. There is a whole team there. I liaise with them as well, sort of pre-award on different proposals. But whatever sort of comes through the law doors, I kind of get sort of, get to work with. And again, it depends. Some people are a lot more collaborative than others. Some go straight to UCD research and proposal support there. In terms of my own sort of development, I try to, I love reading. I try to stay current. The research professional, I'm on a couple of the alerts for what's getting funded, what news is trending, and not just in Ireland, but like I try to keep track of what's going across Europe. I've worked really hard to get better at sort of finances and budgets and, working out VAT and overhead and, all those unsexy things. But they really help when you're trying to shape the finance side of a proposal, because that's part of my remit too. And it also means when I go to talk to UCD, the research finance office, at least I can speak in an informed way, or I'm not draining. I try not to drain of their resources either. I go to them when I need support or help, but I try to sort of do all I can, and I work closely with them. I attend workshops that they throw and organize, and like that. It's about reading what's getting funded, even the titles alone. there's been a great trend in sort of this theatre form, this actual, the public display and output of research. And of course, it's going to evolve now into very COVID-19 specific stuff, and my researchers will be looking at from a legal angle maybe, or a behavioural angle. And so it's trying to kind of like be a sponge, and it's just trying to stay connected. I got to do the Aurora program this year, which UCD also runs. So it's the sort of women in leadership thing. So I got to go out and meet other women in the higher education sphere across all platforms, whether it was academics, the professional services, HR, EDI, and that was just, it's really important to network. And I hate the word, and I hate networking. I'm behind the scenes. I can do this, but I'm dying inside. But look at my neck, I go all red. But it's about that. It's about the people and the research and the work, and trying to keep that sort of engagement up, and that keeps the job interesting then.
Okay, thank you. Then I have actually two people and somebody's anonymous, but also Delphine is asking how long you take to review a proposal, and for instance, Marie Curie individual fellowship.
The Marie Curies, I will probably dedicate the guts of a week to, depending on how far advanced they are. The IRCs are different, because sometimes people will just do them in chunks, or they'll need more specific help with the personal statement, or the career and development, and that's where I'll come with the most current information about the host institution, about the school, about UCD, so that they can bring that in on their writing. So it depends. Sometimes you'll meet a character or two, and they'll break your heart because they're not getting it at all. And they'll have a notion of what it is that they think it should be, but they're not answering what they're asked, and so sometimes you might have to cut them loose, or say, listen, I'll give you a day, but I've got 2 or 3 others. So it's about prioritizing. It's often a judgment call you have to make yourself. And then depending on if there's other funding calls, but the Marie Curies I think are significant enough, and the people who are applying for them really mean it. You don't undertake a Marie Curie just for the go heck of it. Like, it's they're bears. Second only to an ERC. They're very demanding, and so if you're coming to the law school with one in mind, and if you mean it, you'll get as much support as I can muster. 2 teenage kids and the dog notwithstanding, but on in the global pandemic.
Yeah, that's taking a toll on us all. That also links to this. There's a question: how many times you read or rewrite a proposal? Probably also priority issue.
It's sort of sad, but I'll read over a weekend if need be, and I'll go to the review sessions. We do these review sessions where you can read other successful proposals that are sort of anonymized or redacted. But the truth is, if you've kept current with what you see is getting funded, you'll be able to pick who they're talking about, or you should be able to, and you can go to their school and you can see their background or their ORMS profile, and and you should be, researchers, they should be synonymous with their work, I think, to some extent. And so I have to say I read a lot of them all the time, because they're always informing me of what's either current, what's trending. What is that difference? It's like, that's my bugbear. What is that difference? And I know I'll never solve it, but I love looking for it and looking to see you know, what's different this year than from last year, and you know, that's sort of what gets me excited in the morning.
Okay. What about from John? I have a question here. When do you draw the line when somebody doesn't want to listen?
Oh, I'm pushing 50. I'll draw that line fairly quickly. I've got too old for this.
Okay.
I had one person, goodness, and like that, I gave them so much support, and I had to go back to their proposed supervisor and say, listen, have you seen this email? Because it was so off the wall. It was completely paranoid. And then, you know, I said, listen, I've 3 or 4 others. I've done my bit here. And they said, no, that's fine. That's fine. And then the next couple of days, I was getting calls from all the other units in UCD going, who is this person? And I said, she's been given all the support in the world. I said, and then I was getting bad mouths, and that was upsetting me. I said, listen, I can show you all the work I've done, but sometimes you just have to draw the line. And
Yeah.
But I get it approved. You know, you have to CYA and policy. So.
Okay. Good. There's also a question from Jennifer. Does Suzanne have any experience working on proposals with multiple authors? And if so, does she have any tips about maintaining a coherent tone and style throughout?
That's a very, very good question. I haven't done, I've worked very much on the periphery of a multiple author proposal, but we were just a partner. We were just a small piece of it, and I was handed it by the head of the school, and you know, sort of, you know, what's your take on that? And it was fairly turgid, heavy stuff, and like that. Often these, Jennifer, you probably know this. Too many chiefs or too many, you know, it's like deaths by committee. It's hard to know. I'd love to see some successful ones and see if there a coherency of tone, and I wonder, did they defer to one person to be sort of the final editor? I think if you've got multiple editing, you know, at some point I'd say you have to decide, okay, we'll let this person round all of this and make it coherent. But by the time I got to our piece, I knew there wasn't much I could contribute, and you know, the head of school understood the same, and we were unsuccessful. But it was interesting to see it. But that was sort of probably my only experience of that. And sorry, I forgot the second part of that question.
Basically that was how to make it coherent with multiple writers.
Yeah. No, it can be tricky.
Then there is a question from Bernard from France. Hello, back from Finland to France. Does Suzanne have any experience as panel members of the Marie Curie actions?
No.
Or any regular exchange with some of them? Okay. So
no, it's very small fish. But
you're experienced one, so that's good.
Yeah. I swim like crazy in the pond.
Yes. And Simon is asking whether English or American English.
Oh, there's only one English. It's be the Queen's English.
Have you had any proposal for NIH or American funders, which would then change?
It's the OUR. There are some, and the S and the Z realize. I'm conflicted. I think I'm ambidextrous on a lot of them now. I think I could go either way, but it's interesting. I think American English is more the norm now, but I'd be still fairly old school in my writing. If you got a letter from me, I'd have an S and a U in labour.
Okay.
A labour of love. I know.
Yeah. Eleanor is asking if this is your main activity at the UCD, and she's saying that they're trying to recruit an editor type of a person, but it's difficult to find the right profile. So what kind of profile would you suggest the person who's doing your job should have?
Oh goodness, it's not the only thing I do. Unfortunately, I look after the research seminars. We have the Sutherland Fellows. We have guest speakers. You know, I think the profile for a good editor is just I think somebody who loves language and in English and writing, and not just English, just language, and you know, regardless of the country you're coming from, if your degree is in English or history or, you know, I think there are very, you know, language heavy disciplines, you know, that are more text based. But the research manager and administrators, as we all are, you know, our remits are very broad, and they expand and contract according to what's happening in the world, or you know, what's happening in an academic year. It can be cyclical. You could be working on, you know, separate projects, but you know, the fact that, you know, we are about research funding, I think first and foremost for the researcher and for the institution, that has to be very well protected. And I got in for a bit of trouble recently because I was getting drawn away to really, you know, periphery things that already were being taken care of. And I put a line, I said, no, I said, I need to protect the integrity of the work we're trying to do here and protect the research manager role, whether it's me or whoever it is going to do it, whether it's heavy on editing or, you know, seminars or different things. This to me, you know, I said, you know, it's a poor use of our resources. You know, I'm not going to give you the best return on your investment if you're dragging me away. So it's about, you know, and ultimately, if you're hiring anybody, a bit of passion. I think people can upskill very quickly. I think one thing I've seen across the board, and it upsets me when people say, well, they can't do the job because they haven't done it before. I think that's an awful shame, because often they want that job because they want to learn something more, something new. This notion that, you know, you can't learn or upskill on a job is a great shame. And I think a lot of really good people, you know, are not getting hired because they're not ticking boxes. So so for the research manager and this profile, somebody who loves to work, you know, somebody who wants to work, you know, somebody enthusiastic, you know, the old, you know, when I worked in history, School of History and War Studies, and I was managing an ERC project, and all the postdocs that come in, and they were a cool bunch, but they used to talk about who would you have in your foxhole. And I was kind of reminded again with COVID, and we're all in lockdown, and you know, the greatest compliment you get is like, you know, who do you want in your work foxhole, or who do you want in your home foxhole? And you know, sorry, there's my dog. But there, you know, to me, that's a good question to ask about anybody you're interviewing. Now I know people, you know, are often, I think most people are very much themselves in interviews. They might be more nervous, but just to think outside the box, you think laterally when it comes to hiring and looking at a broader skill set. Because I think even us research managers, administrators, we bring a fairly broad, you know, skill set to the table. But
yeah, there isn't always a school for doing this anyway. So I would. Can I ask you, Niall, to comment on the fact that we have 1 minute to go, and I have at least 2, maybe 3 questions to
Yeah, go ahead. If you guys are happy to answer more questions, I'm happy to keep the session going.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know, Delphine here has raised hand, so I'm guessing she might want to talk. I'm going to allow Delphine now to ask the question. Please, Delphine. Delphine, you're muted still. Unmute. Okay. I can't. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, Delphine. I don't know why I cannot. I allowed you to talk, but you're still muted. Weird. Maybe Delphine, you can ask if you have a question. I'll ask it in the question answer. I'm guessing this raising hand has been disabled somehow. But I have a question from Anke. Do you explain most of the suggestions in a Word file? in order to convince them of that your choice is a better choice, which is time consuming?
Yeah.
Or this actually, I also had this question: do you meet them live or something like this? How do you communicate your suggestions? In general, what is your workflow with the researchers? Oh, she would have also could have asked this herself, but I did that question. I'm sorry. Okay.
That's all right. Well, in turn, I often do the comments and I sort of explain myself, or if I'll have done the document in review mode, and then I'll just in the email I'll say, listen, it's my 2 cents worth. I maniacal about certain things, font size, no underline. I have certain things, and then it's up to them to take on board or dismiss according to what they think works or doesn't work. With the researchers, we have a fairly big academic staff now. I think we're at 35. We could be going up to 40 in the next few months. We've got a couple of new hires. So often what I'll do is I'll sit down, actually have to do one by Zoom this week, and just talk through their sort of research, their own research agenda, or where they're coming from. I have this sort of bespoke research profile that I do, where I log, when they got their PhD, how many years in terms of ERC, post PhD, consolidator, advanced, what societies. I essentially profile them, and then sort of based on that, and then based on their own sort of ambitions. And in fact, some of the new hires have a fairly high, there's a very high expectation on them now to deliver some sort of significant funding within the next 3 to 5 years. So that's a lot of pressure. And so we will have to strategize and map out, the in-house funding, the national funding, and the international funding, where they could potentially take their work, and we'll discuss them joining some of we've got about 7 research groups, institute and centres. I'll see if there's anything sort of interdisciplinary that they should be talking to. Over the years, you meet all sorts of people who have all sorts of ideas. And, so I work fairly closely, on a one-on-one basis with them.
Then I have a question from Avundar. Do you do a kind of self-evaluation for checking success rates between the ones that got help from you and the others that didn't, and how big is the difference?
I sort of do it sort of personally for myself, and I did it recently, and I don't know if the person was trying to sort of put me back in my place, but I didn't believe them anyway. But of the 6 PhD students that I got sort of to do the class with and support through an IRC process, only one of them was successful, and that's still not bad. 1 out of 6 ain't bad. One was a resubmission, which I was very disappointed for. But the truth is, the one that was successful took the most guidance, gave me the most time, spent the most time with me, and and literally really, went above and beyond. And maybe that's just anecdotal, or in this incident, but I think that almost is the key difference. Is like, research is so personal to the researcher. It needs the one-on-one relationship, and it was just a really good idea too. And I get to sit in now on other sort of smaller adjudications for different competitions, and I like to think that I can pick out the ones that they're going to pick out as well. And I often I'll have a bit of the backstory, because I'll have helped with their proposal or with their budget, and so again, I'm not a decision maker, but I could be a sort of influencer. But I also like that I know, or I could see, what's new and novel, and that would bring the school maybe someplace in a different direction, and that's exciting. But I haven't done full metrics on it. But the school as a whole, I have to say, up until 7 weeks ago, we were on fire, and we are on fire, and it's great. I have to say, I'm proud of the law school. I'm proud of the dean, the UCD research or finance office. Big shout out. we work it incredibly hard, and it's borne fruit. The school has 3 ERCs at the moment. We have a great cohort of PhD students coming up through the ranks. We have a Marie Curie. We may get another. It's great. And I got to be part of that, and I got to you get to be part of, again, sounds very cheesy, but you get to be part of something bigger. And that's I can spend 8 hours doing that, give or take. And I consider that to be a privilege.
Yeah, here's still one comment from Simon saying, "Who do you want in your work foxhole? I like it." Probably gonna steal that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Anybody? Now I don't have any more in the question answer box.
Great. Cool.
We had quite a nice follow-up.
We did, yeah. It was good,
Yeah.
good numbers. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Yeah, I'd like to take the opportunity now as well from EARMA just to thank Suzanne for this fascinating and really interesting workshop today. It's been great. I know that everyone's got a lot out of it, and we hope that we can coax you into doing maybe another one down the line as well, perhaps.
Yeah, sounds good.
I take that as a pledge. Great. and to Maria as well, of course. You've been a wonderful host today, and you make it look effortless. So that's great. We've had a great conversation here, and now I'd like to kind of just flag as well with everyone. So we're at the halfway mark of the EARMA digital sessions. It's been going great so far. Thank you very much for participating. We have 4 more interesting sessions coming up over the next few days. Tomorrow we'll be looking at participation of the EU13 in Horizon Europe and more. We'll be looking at equality, diversity and inclusion, and we'll be speaking with a European Commission speaker as well, Anna Panagopoulou. So get onto our website, earma.org, check out to see what's there. You'll find the Zoom links there, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Super.